Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Countout. On today's episode, given what we saw at the Royal Rumble, the shocking, I guess not really that shocking, but man, it was well executed, betrayal of Sami Zayn. So on today's episode of Countout, we're going to talk about shocking betrayals in the world of wrestling. So there's a couple of caveats here. Number one, none of these are behind-the-scenes betrayals like the Montreal Screwjob, because there's way too many of them.
Oh, yes.
Like the world of wrestling.
The history of professional wrestling is just littered with betrayals, yes.
It really is. It really is. It was kind of interesting trying to whittle this down to 10, but we do have some honorable mentions, and I wanted to honorably mention a different one first before we dive into this. And it's sort of like one of the first biggest on-screen betrayals in the WWF. I think it wasn't the WWF, but I'm speaking about Larry Zbyszko turning on Bruno Sammartino. I watched a bunch of that stuff last night, and the crowd reaction is pretty off the charts. Of course, Larry Zbyszko was Bruno Sammartino's protege.
After how did he become his protege, Steve?
He stalked his house and
wandered into his backyard. That's what I remember hearing.
So he didn't. I actually went back last night while I was watching this stuff.
Okay, good.
And I was like, okay, wait a second. I know we heard that somewhere. I want to hear it from somebody's mouth. So I watched the Larry Zbyszko shoot interview where he talked about training with Bruno. Mm-hmm. He was 16 years old. He wanted to get into wrestling. He knew where he lived because it was just down the street. And he was driving past there because he said he used to drive past there all the time. So he was stalking him basically. And he noticed Bruno was in his backyard sunbathing. And so he went up to his hedges and he started like invading his backyard. It wasn't he wandered back there. He went into his backyard via some hedges that he was crawling under. And Bruno looked and was like, the hell is this guy doing? And then he took him under his wing.
Wow.
I think Bruno understood, man, I'd rather maybe keep this crazy guy close to me because if need be, I can take him down.
That could be.
With whatever his finisher used to be, probably a bear hug. I don't know what his finisher
Oh, yeah,
is.
punch, knee, something, I don't know.
Slam.
I don't know.
So after a fairly decent career, but always feeling like he was under Bruno Sammartino's shadow, they went and had an exhibition match that turned chippy pretty quickly, especially on the part of Larry Zbyszko, who at a certain point just started putting boots to the elder Bruno Sammartino, who at that point was way past his prime.
Yeah, it was 1980.
Yeah. And Bruno, confused about this. At one point, there was like a vicious. They took their feud all the way to Shea Stadium in front of 36,000 people.
Cage match, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And what's his face? Zbyszko took like a wooden chair to Bruno's head, an unprotected headshot back in '83 or whatever it was. But fascinating stuff, really cool stuff. Eventually, Bruno got his shit back, and Zbyszko, the living legend. Ended up as a famed WCW commentator.
And perhaps most famous to wrestling fans these days for saying, he's in the wall!
Well, wrestling fans that are familiar with Going In Raw anyways.
Yeah.
Because that was a favorite of ours.
Oh, you got that right, buddy.
Yeah. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive into it. We'll talk about the honorable mentions. And of course, we'd like y'all to let us know what your guys' favorite, because we probably missed out a bunch of them. There's a ton. Favorite betrayals in the comments below. Also, I want to mention tomorrow on the channel, that is Sunday, we've got WCW Nitro Episode 1 Retro Review going up right now. Also, there's a poll available right now for $5 and up patrons and YouTube channel members to vote on the next retro review, which we'll be recording live for the $5 and up patrons and the YouTube channel members this coming Friday. And it's going to be either WWF Raw Episode 1 or ECW Hardcore Television Episode 1. So be on the lookout for that poll. And there's all sorts of other stuff there on the Patreon, YouTube channel memberships that you can get access. So let's dive into this, Larson. Number 10.
10.
Triple H tells DX to suck it. Several times, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot of Triple H on this list. We probably could have put some more. So let's go all the way back to WrestleMania 14, because the story kind of starts there. So WrestleMania 14, of course, Shawn Michaels lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin, the main event. It was the start of the Austin era. And on the Raw after WrestleMania 14, that's when Triple H turned to his friend.
Yeah.
He turned to the Clique and brought X-Pac back to WWF at the end of the show in a cage match. New Age Outlaws joined DX as well. And while, prior to WrestleMania 14, DX heels, New Age Outlaw heels, it was a group that pretty quickly the fans really got behind, and they were more or less baby faces like right away.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they were baby faces for the whole next year, more or less. Yeah. Let's go to January 25th, 1999, about a year, 10 months or so later, 9 months later, 8 months later, whatever the math is. On Raw, Chyna turns on Triple H, joins the corporation.
Yeah.
And that was a harbinger of things to come, because almost 1 year after 14, WrestleMania 15 is when Triple H turned heel. Helped Shane McMahon beat X-Pac. So Shane retained the European title at WrestleMania 15. Now Triple H is in the corporation too.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that was a fair trade? Because earlier, Kane, Triple H and Kane had a match. Kane was booted from the corporation so that they could bring on Triple H and Chyna. Is that a good trade in your eyes?
Yeah.
That's a good trade. Yeah,
that's a great trade. Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic trade. Yeah.
The guy's running the company now. The other guys, running a prominent county in Tennessee though. So.
Well, he's mayor.
I know, but it's like a county mayor, which is kind of a bigger. It's like kind of like the governor of like a large chunk of the state.
Yeah, that confuses me.
It does confuse me too. I'm not gonna dive too deep into that.
Yeah, anyways, I don't understand it.
He's a jackass. Let's move on.
Regardless, yeah, this is the first of many heel turns, betrayals.
Well, so the funny thing is, by the time October rolled around that year, DX was basically still together. Like when Stephanie and Triple H did their thing, they were still kind of the McMahon-Helmsley era. DX was still basically a thing. But Triple H can't help himself. Eventually, he was just like, I just want to go solo. I just don't want to do this thing anymore. And so he went solo. And then in 2002, when Shawn Michaels came back and joined the NWO, and then that didn't go anywhere, Triple H was like, apparently HBK, if I remember correctly, swung a deal to get Triple H onto the Raw brand, and so he could reunite with his buddy. And mind you, HBK had not been in an actual match at that point. He was just there. He was just to be there. And and so they were like, hey, let's be DX again. So they come out and the fans are all going crazy and they got their DX shirts on and they're doing the suck it thing. And then they get in there and Triple H does the let's get ready to suck it thing. And then he's about to do more DX stuff. Just right there in the ring. Whoop-ah, he gives him HBK a pedigree. This is the weird thing that I remember watching this live and being like, that's weird. So he gives him a pedigree. It's like, oh no, he laid out HBK. The next week, there's a thing where HBK gets attacked in the parking lot. But Triple H is like, oh, my friend, what happened to my friend? Oh, and then and they do this thing on the monitor and HBK is like, yeah, look, the security cam footage, it's you. And he's like, that's right, it's me. And I'm like, why wouldn't anybody know this? Like, it was weird. And it's funny because I looked this storyline up. I remember even thinking that was weird back then. I'm like, how is it not him? He just turned on him a week before.
Yeah.
And then I remember looking this up on Reddit or I think it was Reddit. And somebody was like, wasn't this kind of weird that it was like clear that it was him? And then everybody in the comments were like, yeah, it was obvious, but this was awesome. Like to a T, everybody was like, oh, this is so great. I don't know.
That's strange.
Yeah, it was really weird. So anyways, he turned on him and then they ended up doing that great match at whatever it was, SummerSlam or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was SummerSlam. Yeah.
When he had the brown pants on.
Yeah. No, that was Survivor Series when Shawn Michaels had the brown pants on Elimination Chamber.
That's right.
That was his second match back.
Yeah, because SummerSlam, I think it was a street fight because he had jeans on, right?
It was supposed to be just a one-off. It was supposed to be a one-off thing.
And then he was like, oh, I can wrestle. I'm stretch. I learned how to stretch my back a little bit so I feel great. Like, man, you could have done that 4 years ago.
Maybe the time away in the long, and eventually was good for him.
Yeah, I think so. He was a mess. I think during those 4 years, he got his shit together.
He did. And I think without getting his shit together, I don't know if he ever would have come back to the ring.
Yeah. So of course they had like a long rivalry, and then they got back together. I think in like 06 or something as DX, and I don't think Triple H turned on him again.
Not that I recall, but it wouldn't surprise me because Triple H turned on everybody.
He turned on everybody always. We're going to get some more of that in just a moment. But first, Larson, number 9.
9.
HBK super kicks Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window.
I mean, that's kind of two things put together. He super kicked him, then put him through the barbershop window.
I know, but that is one of those wrestling Mandela effect things. Yeah. Is that people think that he super kicked him through the window? He super kicks him, and then Marty Jannetty tries to jump through the window.
Yeah, according to Heenan. Yes, he tried to jump through the window to escape Shawn Michaels. So of course the Rockers, a tag team going back to the AWA days. They eventually, I mean, if my memory serves from watching the Shawn Michaels 80 biography, they got signed by WWE, got fired, and then got brought back later on down the line. Got fairly popular, won the tag titles in a match that on TV never happened because the turnbuckle broke.
Yeah.
So their one tag title reign was never officially recognized.
Yeah.
And so seemingly because of infighting between them, if not maybe other reasons, they broke up seemingly both behind cameras and in front of the cameras. So apparently there was some beef with money, where apparently, depending on whose account you believe, Jannetty, it's like, hey, we can get a deal with WCW, and a guaranteed deal. And then, but Jannetty says no, it was HBK pushing for them to leave WWE. Regardless, apparently, Vince was gonna let them go. And then Shawn Michaels like, no, I don't want that to happen. And then they both stayed, and then eventually the turn happened. There was apparently a backstage fight between Shawn Michaels and Jannetty that was instigated seemingly by Roddy Piper. Booze was involved,
of course.
So there seemed to be a lot of beef between Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty. It seemed inevitable there was to be some sort of split happening. January 11th, 1992, on the Wrestling Challenge, on the set of Brutus's barbershop, it happened. Where it seemed like, so Marty's like, hey, I'm going to turn my back. If you want to walk away, that's fine. But if you want to shake my hand and work this out, let's do it. And I'm thinking to myself watching this, well, if your back's turned to Shawn Michaels, he has to turn you around to shake your hand.
Yeah.
Why would you turn your back to him anyways? So Shawn Michaels turned him around.
Booze was involved. That's why, Larson. Booze was involved.
Maybe. And so they super kicked them not through the window, picked them up, and then put them through the window.
Yeah. And the crowd was just sort of like, But it wasn't like a big, there wasn't like a big Wilhelm scream.
Well, probably because there was like 50 people in the audience. This was on a TV studio.
I watched this last night, and it's kind of funny. They're like, you just hear like in the crowd.
Yeah.
Smart move, Michaels. And sadly, that moment led to the familiar colloquialism in wrestling, who's the Marty Jannetty? Whenever there's a tag team, which one's the Jannetty?
Yeah. I mean, of course, Shawn Michaels went on to become one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time.
Yeah.
Marty Jannetty, not so much.
Marty Jannetty posts some of the most uncomfortable Facebook posts I've ever read in my life. I mean, if the Mount Rushmore of wrestling included who can write the most uncomfortable Facebook post, then he might be on there. Otherwise, regardless, despite his new Rockers partnership with what was it, like Al Snow, right?
It was Al Snow. It was Leif Cassidy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that failed to capture the magic that the Michaels Jannetty duo.
Yeah, and they HBK and Jannetty feuded on and off here and there over the next few years.
Yeah, they tried to make something out of Jannetty. They did. I feel like he probably prevented a little bit of that from happening.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good wrestler, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, he just wasn't. He wasn't Shawn Michaels.
No,
he was the Jannetty, Larson.
Yeah, he was the Jannetty. Yeah.
Anyways, let's move on here. Number 8. Owen Hart gives Bret Hart the boot. So Owen returned to the WWF ring in the fall of 1993 when Bret Hart's feud with Jerry Lawler had been temporarily sidetracked.
So this is all from Wikipedia, so I just copy and pasted here. So don't read this verbatim, Steve.
Well, I'm adding a couple extra adjectives and stuff, and some first names.
So this in a lot of ways, this is like kind of the least dramatic heel turn in some capacity. It's very 1993, 1994.
This is the only one I didn't revisit out of the entire list.
All right. So we go to Survivor Series. So Owen is hurt, comes back in 93. and he's part of Bret's team at Survivor Series, which includes the rest of the Hart family. You got Bruce, you got Keith, you got Bret, you got Owen.
And was Stu sitting ringside?
I'm sure Stu and Helen were there. And so they're supposed to face a team headed by Lawler. Lawler was hurt. Shawn Michaels was Lawler's replacement. So at one point during the match, Bret's sent towards the ropes. Owen happens to be standing there with his back turned. He gets knocked off the ropes or the apron, hits the barricade. And so after the match, Owen's mad at Bret because he thinks Bret did that on purpose. And so there's some tension there in the family. So you got Stu there and all the other Hart brothers trying to
chill everything out.
Calm it down. So eventually Owen is cutting a promo saying, "I'm tired of being in your shadow, Bret. I want a match with you." And then Bret responds in another promo saying, "Under no circumstances will I ever wrestle my brother. It's not going to happen." So eventually they patch things up heading into Rumble 94. In fact, Bret got them a tag title shot against the Quebecers. And it's going fine until, for some reason, this bit is interesting. So Bret's trying to run the ropes, I think. And so Johnny Polo, Raven, lowers the second rope. And so Bret goes flying to the floor, but unless you kind of don't know the setup, it literally looks like Bret turns around, just ejects himself out of the ring. Because the timing's a little off. And so once he's out there, the Quebecers proceed to break every rule imaginable to destroy his knee, yet there is not a disqualification at any juncture.
What do they do? For example, give me an example.
Literally take a plastic chair from the crowd and dump it on his leg.
You can't do that.
I know.
That's a disqualification.
I know. And so they're wrecking his knee. And at one point, Owen's like, "Come on, this is insane. Stop this, ref." The ref's not doing anything. I mean, some of it's behind the ref's back, but not all of it. The Quebecers have him out on the floor forever, destroying his knee. In the ring, destroying his knee more, back outside the ring. It's just they're wrecking his knee completely and totally. And so eventually Bret tries to put on a sharpshooter and can't do it. And so ref says, "Oh, Bret can't do sharpshooter, match over."
Well, to be fair, if he can't give his signature move, why are you even having the match?
Exactly. Match over.
Yeah.
So then Owen gets in the ring.
You're never going to win this thing without your sharpshooter.
I know. Unless Yokozuna's in there, then Bret can find a way.
Then you could fall on him, yeah.
Yes. So then Owen gets in the ring. Rather being concerned for his brother, he's giving Bret the business about not winning the tag titles. And eventually, he gives him. Eventually, Bret gets to his feet. Owen gives him a kick to the side of the knee and leaves.
Oh wow!
And so that leads to WrestleMania 10. Of course, Bret later that night would win the Royal Rumble along with Lex Luger.
Yeah, right.
And that leads to their match at WrestleMania 10. Fantastic bout, probably the best match. One of the two best matches on that card, along with the ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon.
Yeah, no, it was a great match.
And it was the feud kind of through that spring and summer, leading up to their cage match at SummerSlam '94. And it, after Owen beat Bret at WrestleMania 10, and after Bret won the title in the main event, there's that great bit where Owen comes out to the ramp. And just the look on his face is like, "I beat you."
Yeah.
And yet you're champion.
It's like, I should be champion.
Exactly. And so the jealousy and the feeling that from Owen's perspective, he's still under Bret's shadow, really drove him all that summer. Owen went on to win King of the Ring that spring, and then ultimately lost to Bret in that cage match.
Yeah.
In '94.
When was the Backlund stuff? That was '95, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, because that's when Diesel won the title. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
'95. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're still feuding all the way through there too.
Yeah. Because didn't who threw it? Wasn't like the Backlund thing, like Owen threw in a towel or something?
Yeah.
No,
he convinced his mom to throw the towel in.
Oh, even worse, he convinced mom to do it. Yeah, I remember seeing that. Clearly, I didn't retain much of it, but good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That was probably one of the more prominent and hotter feuds in WWE during that era when a lot of stuff creatively was pretty tepid.
That era was bereft of hot anything.
It's interesting too. Here on Something to Wrestle With, I believe it's Pritchard saying that he had to convince Vince to have, I think it was specifically the Hardys feud, and Vince was adamant, "Oh, no one wants to see brothers fight."
I remember that as well, and I wonder if there was some difference there. I don't know. I remember that. I remember that as well. And there was another instance that I was thinking of as well that wasn't this one. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, wait a second, they were brothers and they fought too. Mm-hmm. So I forget which one it was. But yeah, I don't know why. There had to have been something else there with the Hardy Boys. Maybe, I mean, the only thing I can think is maybe that might have just been Vince bullshitting because he just liked the Hardys as an act.
That could be.
And maybe he felt that like Jeff was the thing and Matt wasn't, or vice versa. And maybe they needed each other. Maybe that was just, that's all I could think, you know?
That could be. And his excuse was no one wants to see brothers fight. That could
be. That could be, yeah. Anyways, let's move on to number 7. Tommaso Ciampa turns on Johnny Gargano. So this is probably like one of the top stories like from NXT. I mean, it's definitely it's funny because it was sidelined like twice because of injuries. And so it never really had like a final payoff. But it did last about 2 years or so. And what they got out of it was really, really good. And the story beats, would always reference previous story beats. Everything made a lot of sense. And you see some of that playing out now, given that was Triple H and NXT. You see that playing out these days with the Bloodline. And whenever people say, man, when has there been a story like this? This is the first thing that sort of comes to mind.
It really does. It really does. This is one of the few wrestling stories that I can think of that rises above a lot of the tropes common in professional wrestling. And that first match against them, or between them, after Ciampa came back from injury, it was like it was steeped in so much symbolism.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A crutch wasn't just a crutch. The knee brace wasn't just a knee brace. It all had meaning beyond them being used as weapons. And that's something I can think of as terribly common in professional wrestling storytelling.
It's not the level of detail like that over such a extended feud is really insane. And in fact, you can go back. I found this great article from, what is it? thesignaturespot.com that breaks this down. And again, I copy and pasted a lot of this stuff here on our notes, but it has a timeline basically. And even going back to the Cruiserweight Classic where Ciampa and Gargano were matched up against each other.
Even before that, when they were I want to say extras in NXT, but they were per appearance deals.
Yeah, they were.
And they got themselves over.
Yeah. But yeah, there was a bit in the Cruiserweight Classic when Ciampa wouldn't hit his V trigger, his running knee, basically on Gargano, and Gargano ended up rolling him up to advance, and they had that great moment in the middle of the ring where they were just sitting there. And like, man, this didn't feel great. Like somebody had to win. This didn't feel great. And that moment of hesitation from Ciampa basically drove, their feud that spanned a couple of years later. There was, of course, at a TakeOver Toronto in November of 2016, they had a 2 out of 3 falls match against the Revival. DIY won the tag team championships there. It was only about 2 months later in San Antonio that they ended up losing them back to the Authors of Pain. In Chicago in May, so about 4 months after that, there was, I think this was a ladder match. Yeah, this is a ladder match. And that is, they lost again. And that's when up on the stage, Ciampa grabbed Gargano and threw him into the LED and screamed, "This is my moment." He gave him, didn't he give him like an air raid crash
off through the stage, through the table.
Yeah, through the table there. And Gargano is just like he's like a hurt puppy. Like he's like, why? He's like trying to process what just happened. Unfortunately, Ciampa had suffered an ACL tear at a live event before that. So after that, Johnny was suffering all sorts of confidence issues. I remember his match against Andrade Almas, where Zelina Vega would like throw the DIY shirt at him, and it shook him so hard he ended up losing the match. Eventually, he found his way back. And after the Almas Gargano match, though, Ciampa showed up with his crutch, and he was doing the thing where he was doing the wave thing. They had a couple matches at TakeOver New Orleans in April 2018. Gargano beat Ciampa in an unsanctioned match. Ciampa then defeated Gargano in a street fight. And these are all, by the way, like 5-star matches. These
that New Orleans ones especially is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely killer. They had a last man standing match where Ciampa defeated Gargano, but basically it was a mistake from Gargano. He was going a little too hard and ended up like missing like a running knee and falling off the stage. And Ciampa he was handcuffed. He was able to get back up to his feet just in time to beat the 10 count. Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately, shortly after that, Ciampa's neck ended up getting, they did like they did that weird main roster run.
Yeah.
Ciampa's neck along the way was injured, so he was out for another long spell. And so they were never, they sort of substituted Adam Cole in the title picture with Gargano. And so they never really got back to it. I get the feeling though, once Ciampa's back from whatever he's got an issue with now, I think it's like a shoulder thing. I forget what it is now.
I don't recall.
But once he's back from that, I have no doubt that they're going to pick that back up. I mean, I'd be shocked if they didn't, if Triple H is still in charge anyways.
Yeah. By the time Ciampa comes back. Yeah, I mean, through that whole spring, summer of 2018, this was like the story in professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The level of detail, the focus on character and things, representing things.
It even changed how we perceive the production aspect of things, because if you remember, that turn happened after the trademark bug, and so like that showed up and everybody's like, oh, this is over, and the trademark fades away and you get that end credit scene basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, oh shit, that was cool. And so now everybody, or from that point on, everybody who expected, sometimes they deliver, sometimes they wouldn't. But it's funny because even to this day, like on pay-per-views, we're like, is something else going to happen? When after the yeah. And that sort of all started here.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Number 6. Evolution kick out Randy Orton. So, of course, Evolution, Larson.
It's a mystery, yeah.
It was a mystery, but not really, what they represented. The past in Ric Flair, the present in Triple H, and the future in Batista, Mark Jindrak, and Randy Orton.
Well, yeah. Man, that's a bummer Jindrak wasn't part of the group.
I know, right?
Best dropkick in the history of wrestling. My goodness.
Absolutely. He was amazing.
Yeah.
Picadillo. Anyways, Orton joined Evolution in January 2003. Evolution, I was, man, I wasn't into Evolution as much as a lot of people were, because they'd be like, sometimes they get too explicit. Like it'd show like them in the limousine and like they were like hugged up with women and they'd be like picking at Randy Orton's nipples and stuff. And I'm like, I don't need to see this level of intimacy between people on my wrestling programs. Oh man. Anyways, so it was great because during this period of time when Orton was with Evolution, if you remember, before Evolution, he was just sort of a cocky dude, and he got injured, and they had those terrible like Randy News Network.
Those were awful
segments.
Awful.
And then when he joined Evolution, that was when he started doing the legend killing stuff. He was Intercontinental Champion for a while, and then eventually he became the youngest WWE champion at the age of 24. Or World Heavyweight Champion, one of them.
He is World Heavyweight Champion, yeah.
Yeah. And as part of Evolution, of course, the big gold belt was sort of synonymous with Triple H at the time.
Therefore, it was top title, too, yeah.
Therefore, it was top title. And so he beat Chris Benoit at SummerSlam 2004 for it. And then the following Raw, Benoit and Orton had a rematch. Orton won that. And afterwards, Evolution came down. Dave Bautista with a wonderfully thick head of hair, too. And, he has him on his shoulders, and everybody's like, yeah, you're the man. You're the man. Everybody's celebrating. And then Triple H does this. He does this. And then he goes, thumbs down.
And then he says, Batista, now. And then Batista drops him. And then they just beat the hell out of him. He's busted open. And here's the interesting thing. The crowd cheers when all this is going on. I'm not sure this is the reaction they wanted, but as soon as Batista dropped Orton, it's not a gasp, it's not boos, it's cheers.
Yeah, you're right. I just watched this right last night. I just thought about that. Yeah.
And even at the end when Triple H hits him with pedigree, cheers. Blasts him with the belt, cheers. Orton bleeding all over the place. This got destroyed by Evolution, and the crowd is cheering for Evolution.
Well, he was kind of a piece of shit. So, like, this guy's going around kicking old people in the head. This is probably the appropriate reaction.
Yeah, I mean, he kicked Mick Foley down a flight of stairs.
And who's going to boo Dave Bautista? Come on, he's awesome.
Yeah, Dave is great. Dave is great. And
yeah,
so
he
it's
kicked a dude down a flight of stairs. That's right.
Yeah. And so pretty quickly after this, Triple H won the title right back. I think it was at Unforgiven. Yeah. And then held it for a while. He held it, in fact, I think until Batista beat him for it at the following WrestleMania.
They did, though, after this, they did let Randy Orton get a lot of shit in. Like, he was sort of hunting the members of Evolution after this. I think at one point he came out of a birthday cake or something and attacked him. And so they did. This was actually it's similar to like 6 months later when they did the same thing with Batista. They used Evolution to springboard a guy into a very obvious, now at this point, legendary singles career. And yes, Triple H had the belt back pretty quickly afterwards, but Randy Orton did okay for himself, winning it, 13 more times or whatever. Yeah, he got
13 more title shots. But yeah, it's. And then, of course, when Triple H was like, hey, Dave, don't go in the Rumble. And Dave's like, I'm going to go in the Rumble. And so, of course, Triple H retains the title. Dave wins the Rumble, and he had the bit shortly thereafter where he's got the two contracts, one with SmackDown, one with Raw, and Dave gives Triple H the thumbs down.
That's good stuff.
It is good
that
stuff.
Is, if you can, I'd actually like to go back and revisit a lot of the Evolution stuff because, even I read like a headline on Twitter that Dave Batista recently said something about like, he's really happy Triple H is in charge of creative now because he's the smartest guy he knows. And so I'm kind of curious that, Evolution lasting a couple of years like it did, if there's a bit more there than, because I mean, dude, launching the careers of Orton and Batista, that's pretty impressive. That's a damn good track record off the bat.
It is
for Triple H, because he was just writing all that shit. That was just Triple H doing that.
Probably. I mean, and all told, Evolution was not around that long.
No,
like 3
they
years
weren't.
basically.
Yeah, right.
It was pretty, as far as factions go, it was. I guess even it lasted longer than the Shield. Shield was only really 2 years. They debuted in 2012, and then Seth turned in 2014.
I'm sort of curious how much Triple H was involved with the Shield breakup stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there. He was like he was the plan. Seth was his plan B.
Yep.
So it wouldn't shock me if he was heavily involved in all that stuff, man. Anyways, so yeah, let's go ahead and move on here to number 5. Kevin Owens turns on Jericho at the Festival of Friendship because he got it. I went back and watched this again. This was just really terrific stuff. Jericho, much like he is today still in AEW, this guy puts on some really terrific character-based performances. And whenever there's a big story beat with Chris Jericho, the setting of it, the execution of said story beat is always done so well. And the attention to detail with Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens here, down to the, last moment where he says, oh, this is great. It's a new list. And he's looking at it, holding it like this. And he says, why is my name on it? And right here it says list of KO. And it's so perfectly executed. It's like a scene in a play or a movie or something. And that's just what you can get from Jericho for his entire career. He's been like that.
Even going before him revealing the list of KO, he drops a really heartfelt, genuine promo on Kevin Owens. It feels like there's no script. There's no bullet points. He's speaking from the heart genuinely, not as Chris Jericho, but as Chris Irvine,
Is it? Yeah, it can't be just me that thinks he knew that this was the end of them being able to travel together, being able to be, friends on and off screen, because you got to maintain a little bit of that kayfabe shit, even outside. And him saying that to Owens, being able to work with you this past year or so has meant that just felt so real.
Yeah, no.
And it added so much.
And Kevin Owens has always been really good about. So to precede this, and we never heard what Triple H said to Kevin Owens, but there's a quick thing. No audio from their conversation where Triple H is talking to Kevin Owens backstage. And it's quick. It's not even 30 seconds, if memory serves. We don't know what he's saying. You can only assume he's saying, Where's NXT Kevin Owens? Where's the Kevin Owens that I handed this title to?
Was that in this episode?
Yeah.
The January 17th? Okay.
February 13th.
February 13th, yeah.
Yeah. Never found out what that conversation was about, but you could connect the dots.
Yeah, sure.
Triple H said something to him that Kevin Owens realized, I gotta do this. Mm-hmm. And watching it back now, the reservation that Kevin Owens has about doing this until he does it, you could feel it just by watching his body language, how he moves, how he keeps his distance from Chris until he has to come closer, you know?
The genesis of this, of course, was Goldberg had challenged Kevin Owens for his Universal title, and Jericho accepted on his behalf. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Owens understood this was a threat, and he was giving him this opportunity to lure out Goldberg. And instead, he brought out Gillberg as a joke. And Kevin Owens gets mad at Jericho because he's like, dude, I thought we were going to do this to take down Goldberg, which would have also salvaged their friendship. Mm-hmm. Because if you do that, you don't have to turn on Jericho, but this guy's a liability at this point. Mm-hmm. And if you can mitigate that liability, then we can keep on having a good time. But he's a prize fighter. He's here for the gold and the money, you know, and then friendships come second or third priority.
Yeah.
And so when he gets mad at him, it's like he's getting mad at him because you ruined our friendship by doing this. You had an opportunity, the subtext, you had an opportunity to salvage this. And now I feel extra bad because you paid $7,000 for this horrible piece of art. You got this ugly painting here you want to put in my home. You know, like you went through all this. I feel even worse, but this has to happen. It's brilliant stuff.
It is really good. And I love the references they made while Kevin Owens is beating down Chris Jericho. Of course, there's the apron powerbomb that makes you think of him powerbombing Sami Zayn on the apron in NXT. And then the final act is when he puts Chris Jericho's face through that TV like Jericho did to Shawn Michaels.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even going back, I watched their first team up was against Enzo and Cass. And Jericho just brings out Owens as sort of like his, his backup basically. And then their friendship forms from there. And, in that, Owens is referencing Sami Zayn as he says, I had a friend. He's talking to Enzo and Cass. He's, I had a friend once, but I realized he was dead weight, so I had to get rid of him. And that's foreshadowing what happened 6 months later with the Frestful friendship. So, sometimes I never, number one, 2016, 2017 WWE was pretty good.
It wasn't that bad. Yeah.
Even watching the intro to Raw, it was like a pretty snappy song. And like I always liked the box Raw graphic, I always liked that one, or the rectangular one. But and I have no idea. Obviously every time there's an alliance in wrestling, you figure eventually it's going to go downhill, they're going to split. Yeah. But it's fun to go and pick out little seeds like that. It's like, oh, this is going to end no different, Yeah.
It's just a shame that it didn't play out as originally planned, them feuding over the Universal title going into WrestleMania. I mean, I understand why they put the belt on Goldberg to eventually lose to Brock, but that being said, how Brock lost to Goldberg at Survivor Series, the previous Survivor Series, pretty much got embarrassed.
Yeah.
Him getting that win back, getting his reputation back, his legitimacy back was enough to justify that rematch and up the stakes in my mind. It didn't need the title.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. I understand why they did it too. And it from a business standpoint, I guess it makes a matter of sense. Although I'll be honest with you, like, you can do things that are above titles. You can do things that are attractions that don't need the titles. And I think that's what that was. That didn't need to be like that. I thought it was interesting. Both men had titles because Jericho had the U.S. title and eventually. But it's just like we talk about now. It's, even in 2016, 2017, Vince had a really hard time rolling with who he had.
Yeah.
And, he chose to go back to 20 years and dust off Goldberg. And do that thing with Brock Lesnar, as opposed to going with, and yes, I know Chris Jericho was, in WCW the same time as Goldberg, but he was a lot more relevant and creative and a master of reinvention. So he always felt fresh and relevant. He still does.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder though, what, as good as the Festival of Friendship was, because I think Jimmy Jacobs had a heavy hand in that.
Yeah.
if Triple H was in charge at the time, I wonder how many more beats would we have gotten? How many more story twists and turns could we have gotten? You know, sometimes with Vince, I wonder, man, what a great moment. I wonder how much better it could have been had there been a proper layer of groundwork, you know, laid down.
Definitely. Where you actually take the steps necessary to build to the moment, to give it more emotional heft, more emotional weight, rather than just, all right, here's a moment for you.
Yeah.
Which is memorable because you did something I didn't expect or did something that was awesome or whatever, but it's not as memorable as it probably could be because you didn't put in the work necessary to make me more invested. You know, and that happened a lot of time with Vince. He's just like, all right, let's do this for the moment to pop a rating or something, rather than building to that moment. And like, oh, so like the next century we're going to talk about a story where they put the work in to build to that moment, and when it happened, like you can't stop thinking about it. It stays with you.
Number 4. Sami and Jey Uso turn their back on the Bloodline. So for anybody watching this 3 years from now, it's pre-WrestleMania, post-Royal Rumble. We're still, processing. We haven't even gotten to this. Well, by the time this airs, we'll have gotten to the SmackDown afterwards.
Yeah.
But we're anxiously awaiting the SmackDown afterwards to see what the next step is. This entire story has been moment after moment and segment after segment. It's like, Larson, why settle for one big moment when you can have a lot of them? You know, the trial of Sami Zayn, going back even further to when he became the honorary Uce. You know, every step of the way has been just nail biter after nail biter, and it shows at its best what pro wrestling can be, what it probably should have been for a long time, and yet because of Vince McMahon has so rarely been.
Yeah, no, I agreed 1,000%. This is, again, it's one of those things that in some capacity we were expecting, since Roman versus Kevin Owens was the main event of the Royal Rumble in 2023. Again, for people watching this in the not too distant future, we knew something major had to happen at the end of the show, and we knew it was going to probably involve Sami Zayn being kicked out of the Bloodline somehow. I don't know what we would put the odds at of them essentially recreating Seth turning on the Shield. We'll get to that in a little bit, with Sami being the one to blast Roman in the back with the chair. This is one of the few instances where a member of a group or a faction betrayed another member, and it was a babyface turn.
Yeah, right.
Usually it's babyface faction. Someone turns on the rest of the members, and they go heel. The rest of the faction don't. This is the opposite of that. This is, with one chair shot, Sami saying, I'm not doing this Bloodline stuff anymore. Solidifying, he's been a babyface more or less for a while, but solidifying babyface turn here, and maybe even Jey Uso, at least for the time being, until Roman gets back into his ear, start manipulating him again. That's what I found really the shocking aspect of it. Not maybe shocking, but surprising, was Jay's reaction, and how quickly he and Sami had formed such a bond, such a strong bond, that Jey can't bring himself to act like Jimmy did. He can't do it.
You know,
and for a variety of reasons. I think that's the brilliance of it is you watch Jey as Sami's about to approach Kevin Owens, maybe hit him with that chair, and he can't stand to look. He can't stand to watch it.
Yeah.
He can't stand to watch what Roman is forcing Sami to do because he was in that position. And he ended up following through on what Roman told him to do. Sami didn't do that. And I think, in a sense, beyond the friendship they have forged, I think Jay's like, he admires to a degree Sami for not blasting his family, blasting Kevin Owens.
What's surprising about it, I think, might be that we don't expect them to operate in a complex manner. You know, it's like we've been fed for so long that, you know, wrestling is no more complex than a bottom line soap opera when it comes to the characters. And it can be so much more. And Jay's reaction felt so real. It felt
complex.
Complex. The fact that he was like in the corner looking down, and almost like he was sort of like in a standing up version of the fetal position. And then he leaves because he's like, I can't do this. Like, it's too much. It was just really excellent execution.
Yeah, it really was.
And an excellent performance and an excellent decision for them to have him react in that manner.
It added so much more emotional heft because it was a situation where Sami blasts Roman, and even if Jay just can't bring himself to do anything, if he just stands there, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But for him to leave the ring,
yeah,
and to see him so utterly devastated that, for him, his whole kind of 2-year story arc is coming full circle, where he's got to revisit all of these emotions that he probably felt.
Yeah.
When Roman was really putting it to him when Roman came back.
Yeah.
And you add that to the relationship, the trust he and Sami have forged. And it's from a performance standpoint, it was just excellently. Jay has done excellent work this whole time. The complexity of what he has to deal with on a week-to-week basis, being a member of the Bloodline, he's done a magnificent job of being relatable and having the audience understand what he's feeling. It's not an easy task.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely outstanding. He's doing terrific work. Let's move on. Number 3. Seth betrays the Shield. So I like that we have these chair shots to the back of Roman Reigns back to back, because this, of course, was the throwback that we all sort of got in the last one in the Bloodline.
You could say this is the inciting incident of heel Roman.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the tribal chief sort of came from this. Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the Shield were coming off of a feud with Evolution, sort of Evolution Reborn. Dave Bautista he did the waving goodbye thing, and left because he was not too happy with his stint in WWE at that point. This was in 2014, so later that night, the Shield are in the ring, and Triple H says, "You always have a plan." My Triple H isn't great. Says, "You always have."
You really have a good Triple H. Don't sell yourself short.
A plan B. And it turns out that Rollins was that plan B. And it was great because he hits Roman Reigns with the chair, and Dean Ambrose doesn't look back. He knows that he doesn't want to know because he knows. He doesn't want to see it because it'll be real. Yeah. And he does the Moxley, oh shit, and so Rollins attacks him as well. And the Shield had broken up. And like you said earlier, the Shield were not together very long. I think it was it 2012 they debuted?
Yes, it was Survivor Series 2012.
Yeah, November 2012, yeah.
Yeah.
And this was, midway through, June, summertime of 2014. So, yeah, less than 2 years. And then, of course, that, again, kudos to the WWE with the Shield, 3 guys who clearly had main event multiple world champion Hall of Fame potential, putting them together and getting it, the timing of this split absolutely perfect. And, Seth Rollins ends up being benefiting greatly from the heel turn because heel Seth is best Seth.
Oh, yeah.
He was able to be a bit more, flamboyant, more villainous, and then Mox, Dean Ambrose went off to do his thing, and Roman Reigns was sort of left in this suspended animation. He kept the theme music, he kept the Shield gear. Yep. The only thing he didn't do was come down through the crowd anymore. But I always appreciated that. And unfortunately, in this case, I don't believe that was a character direction that was supposed to, indicate that, oh, this guy is stuck in the past because he's been betrayed. Yeah. I don't think it was meant to be that, but you could totally view it that way.
I think it was simply Shield was really over. We want Roman to be really over. We want to associate him with the Shield as much as we can. So therefore, he keeps the theme of the vest. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Although the idea that he was never able to let go is a pretty fascinating one. Vince McMahon obviously tried to make him a thing, and it wasn't until he became the tribal chief where he sort of divorced himself of all that Shield stuff. But the memories haunt him. You know, whether it's Seth Rollins able to play games with him, the only guy to get a win, DQ win over him at last year's Royal Rumble, or this year when Sami Zayn hit him in the back and he collapses in the same manner.
Exact same way.
And the trauma is all over his face.
And I think all his demands of the fans to acknowledge him is a reference to them refusing to acknowledge him when he was being pushed as the guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, so much of the story, and we've seen it, you know, through the months, through the years, so much of the story is referencing Roman's failed push the first time around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, once pandemic hit and Roman, you know, took a break, took a leave from the company and came back with this new iteration of the character that, man, just through the months, how it's formed and how they've been able to reference his past and how it's informed who this character is has been really fascinating. Again, everybody in the Bloodline storyline has done a fantastic job of portraying their characters, including Roman.
You know, I saw a tweet directed at I think it was Solomonster. I think it was Jason Solomon. That said, you know, is the Bloodline story Jay's story? And he said it's his story as much as it is Sami's. And no, it's a full ensemble.
It is.
Everybody, I mean, the three main characters, you know, obviously Roman, Sami, and Jay, they're the focal point. But man, you can look at Solo, you can look at Jimmy, and they have their own thing. Yep. And it is a true ensemble effort. This is no one person story. This is a story of family. Yep. You know, I don't know that it's probably easy to say that The Godfather is, you know, Michael's story, but that's not. It's a generation story, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what the Bloodline is.
It totally does make the same reference, comparing it to The Godfather. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but we all know what happened with the Shield afterwards.
Yeah.
And what it meant after that. So we'll just sort of move on here. Number 2. Stone Cold Steve Austin shakes hands with Vince McMahon. He turns his back on the shocking betrayal of the entire WWE universe, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't call it WWE universe back then. That's what it is, though.
Oh, it's the fans.
So I was watching some videos, not so much the My Way video package, because we've all seen that several times over.
Oh, hey, can I just interject really quick about the My Way video package? I feel like it's kind of overrated.
It is.
They didn't do nearly as many like segments between these two. They keep on going back to the beer thing.
I know. It's like the same 2 segments, just edited different ways. It really is.
Right. Yeah, right. It's a great song, and and there are cool moments.
It's got good energy. Yeah. But if you watch the interview that The Rock and Stone Cold did with JR, that's where it kind of really lays out the foundations of the story of the match itself, where Stone Cold has a line. I'll try to paraphrase it best I can. Essentially, it says, on a personal level, I don't like you and I need to beat you for that. But on a professional level, essentially saying, and that crosses over with the personal, we're fighting for the top spot. And I need to win this match to be the guy here. I need to win it. And he doesn't go so far as to say, and I will do anything to do that, but that's the subtext.
Sure, yeah.
With the intensity with which he delivers that. So if this was anybody else in WWE at the time other than Stone Cold and the heel turn happened, it would be shocking. I think it'd be satisfying to the degree I think they were hoping it would be. But since it was Stone Cold, who was still the most popular person in the entire company, still selling merch. And it was simply just Stone Cold saying, all right, I think this has run its course. I want to do something different. And Vince saying, I was watching the interview JR did, Inside the Ropes thing. And I guess Vince told JR, I owe it to Steve to give him this opportunity. Because, you know, obviously for the previous 3 years, you can go back to 1987, 4 years, Stone Cold made a ton of money for the WWF.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so they rolled the dice with it. Apparently JR argued against it. I'm sure he wasn't the only one.
I do kind of wonder if, you know, they're riding at such a high. They had so many great characters and there was a lot they could have done with it. Or there was a lot of sort of backup plans, you know, if the risk was mitigated a little bit because of their depth, but also given that Hogan had successfully turned heel after, God, however long he was a good guy. I wonder if that maybe, you know, gave Vince, you know, the idea that, hey, you know what? Crazier things have happened. Let's give it a shot.
So JR talked about that. And so right after WrestleMania 17, when Stone Cold turned, Rock was gone making movies. Rock wasn't there.
Okay.
And so JR was talking about how they were more or less bereft of the third baby face in line to really challenge Austin. Like they didn't really have anybody ready to go.
Oh, wow.
At that moment. That's how he put it. You know, I guess I could look at the roster to see if, you know, that's accurate or not, but that's how he put it. Was like, we did, you know, we had obviously tons of talent, but there wasn't a baby face ready to step up and fill that void at that point. That's how he put it. And like the huge difference here between Austin and Hogan is that Hulkamania, you could argue, you know, was
it had petered out
of steam
years
back in '93, you know, when Hogan left WWF.
Well, dude, you look at '92. No, you look at that Royal Rumble '92, and that crowd is already turning on him in favor of Sid.
I know. Well, I mean, it's Sid, so can't really argue that point. Whereas he kind of felt like babyface Stone Cold had some legs left. I know he felt like it had run its course. And he just wanted, I think at that point, he wanted to be a heel because he enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
And apparently, according to JR, like the day after WrestleMania, and he watched there's an interview or a promo that Stone Cold does with Vince in the ring. And he teases that he's going to stun him at one point. He's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't do that to Mr. McMahon. Apparently JR said like almost instantly Stone Cold's like, yeah, I should have done that. And he's talked about that, you know, and that's what they started the transition to. Like, all right, I'm not going to get over as a menacing heel because people aren't going to buy into it. If I do, like, if I start stunning everybody, the crowd's going to cheer.
Yeah.
So they went the comedic route, and there's a lot of really good stuff that Stone Cold did as the comedic heel.
Yeah, there was. I remember watching 17 live, and I forget if at that point in 2001, if you and I were watching it together or not.
I watched it live. I don't remember if it was. I don't remember where I was though.
I know I watched the one
at my parents' house.
I watched the Rock versus Hogan the following year. No. When was this? This was what year was this? This was 2001, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so after this is when, they had just bought WCW. Yeah. The following year, at that point, because by Survivor Series, I think is when Austin turned back face. And so it was the following year he had the NWO match. So I was watching at that bar that we used to go to that would show it.
What, Yankee Doodles?
Yeah, Yankee Doodles. Yeah. I watched 2002 there. 2001, I don't know who I watched it with.
I think I was at my parents' house, but I could be wrong.
I just remember being really disappointed. When Austin shook McMahon's hand, I remember thinking, that's lame.
Yeah. And the thing about it, too, is that it's not just like one act on Vince or Austin's part that kind of signifies, oh, there's a heel turn here. There's a protracted segment that starts with Vince going in and pulling the Rock off a cover after a people's elbow. And then Austin says, hey, hand me a chair, Vince. And he does. And you think, all right, chair shot, match over. No. There's a lot more that happens before.
There's a lot more match. I didn't go back and watch this particularly.
Yeah, there's a lot more. There's like 3 more false finishes.
Are people just super confused? Like, what the hell? Why are they working in tandem?
Yeah, and I think
probably was too.
If it was a situation where there's like one decisive moment that Stone Cold uses Vince's help to win the match, maybe it would have been more impactful and maybe worked better. I don't think it worked well at all.
My thing, I just remember the lasting image of Stone Cold. The word didn't even have any meaning back then. I remember the word coming into usage until like 2 years ago. Simp. I was just like, he looks so weak right now. I'm like, this is pathetic. And it's not like it, to me, it wasn't interesting pathetic. It was just like, it was the first time I think I ever was like, God, Vince is just desperate right now. Like, this is terrible storytelling right here. I don't like this. But I don't know, maybe if I watched it back today and watched, what they were going to do with it, maybe things would be different, because I've heard people I've heard people on Twitter defend this move. And I was like, when I watched this live, this was a terrible idea. I hated this.
Yeah. Even the finish of the match. I mean, it's a great match. The crowd's super into it. There's all sorts of awesome false finishes, but at the end of the match, you don't get a decisive stun or anything. Stone Cold takes the chair, hits it with, hits the Rock in the gut with it a few times, and the Rock rolls over on his back, and he blasts him with the chair in the back a couple times, turns him over and pins him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There's not even like a decisive stunner. It's not even like a chair shot to the head. The Rock kicks out of the chair shot to the head.
Oh, yeah.
But a few body blows, and then the Rock doesn't kick out of that.
Yeah, right.
It's like, it kind of felt like he needs something a little more decisive to finish the match, But
Yeah, I remember not being into this. But yeah, like you said, the comedy stuff later on, it was cool. And then eventually when they were like, oh, we need the real Stone Cold. We need Stone Cold. When he finally came back and the crowd popped big because he was, stunning people again and being cool and being a rattlesnake again. That stuff was fine like in November. But yeah, no, I remember this because everybody always talks about, 17 is such a great match. And it might be, but that ending to me always soiled it. It was just, man. All right, man, let's dive into number one. Hogan's the third man, brother. Oh, boy. The amount of garbage that was thrown into this ring was absolutely shocking. Of course, Hogan joining Hall and Nash and forming the new World Organization of Wrestling was a shock sent through the wrestling world. I always loved going back because you can get on the internet, you can see like old message board threads of people like who they think it's going to be. And of course, there was all sorts of speculation. Was it Bret Hart because he didn't have a contract with WWF at the time? Was it Lex Luger? He was already in the company, but he actually would have made some amount of sense.
Was it going to be Sting? Yeah, because he'd already kind of walked out. No, that was later. Sorry.
Was it Macho Man might have made some sense. I think the WWF hotline had suggested that it might have been Jeff Jarrett. And then I think in the Wrestling Observer, if I'm not mistaken, it was floated out there that it might be Midian. Or Mabel. Mabel. Yeah. Midian. Mabel. Yeah. Mabel. Yeah. And I think there's like a shirt out there. I forget if it's like Bischoff put it out or somebody put it out that Mabel's the third man. But yeah, a lot of different ideas out there. And it ended up being like the shocker of shockers. Apparently Sting was ready to go if Hogan got cold feet at the last minute. And admittedly, even though today is, of course, fuck Hulk Hogan Day.
As it is every day, yes.
For Hogan to ditch everything that he knew that generated his success and actually go out there and do this. Pretty interesting that he went through with it.
That being said, you can see the hesitancy on his face his entire walk out to the ring.
Oh, he doesn't want to do this.
No, he does not want to do it.
Yeah, he's like, good thing Postomania went under, brother, because otherwise I'd never be able to do this.
At this point, Hulkamania not only in WWF but WCW is completely and totally run its course. This is like his last gasp attempt to remain relevant.
It is, and it worked because for years after this, he still was. Yeah. He got that ridiculous contract from WCW in '98. Yeah.
Probably largely on the success of the NWO.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been interesting to see how this storyline would have gone had it been Bret or Sting, someone who didn't have the creative control clause in their contract. Would have been more of a team effort because for pretty quickly, even though the NWO started to really expand their ranks, the spotlight was really focused on Hogan, not so much. I know Hall and Nash got their opportunities, but they were the ones who led the way and started it. And if it had been Bret, Sting, even Luger, any of the other names mentioned as possible third men, would the direction of the storyline maybe been a bit different and not so Hogan focused?
Dude, I don't know.
Sorry, let me get this point in real quick. It probably would have been Hogan focused, but he would have been on the opposite side, the one fighting the NWO rather than Sting.
Yeah, good luck. The crowd would have crapped all over that. Man, I mean, look, just judging by, and, going back to when we were in college back in '98 watching this stuff, before we knew what kind of person Hulk Hogan is, to me, the strength of the NWO, so much of it lied in Hogan because it was essentially Hall and Nash were able to take Superman, a guy who is unbeatable, and turn him bad. And all that came with that. And on top of that, you sort of also understood that Hogan and Bischoff were actually running the show. So there was a little bit like, oh, who are they going to let get over him? That's why the Goldberg Hogan match, as bad as Goldberg was, like, that, to do that on Nitro in front of 60,000 people it felt big. And so Hogan, he did for what he is, he made the NWO feel like a big deal. I don't know that anybody else in that position could have done that. I don't know that Sting could have, or Bret Hart, or Lex Luger.
Well, I think, here's the thing. Sting could have, as relates to his position in WCW. On a national level, no. Sting was babyface pretty much since he debuted WCW.
Yeah, sure.
And for him to turn heel would have been shocking within the world of WCW. Hogan turning heel was shocking in the world of professional wrestling. And so, there's a difference there. And in terms of kind of generating the buzz around it, would Sting turning have had the same impact? No. And as you mentioned, the Goldberg match against Hogan a heel Sting would have carried the same amount of weight as Hogan. No. I'm just kind of spitballing here thinking, okay, where could the story have gone that might have been different and maybe more satisfying? Since, you go back to Starrcade when Hogan tried to politic his way into beating Sting, when in no universe should that have ever happened.
Well,
because it doesn't make sense for the story.
I do wonder if, because, the one thing that WWF had on WCW was the Attitude Era had that cool factor. So if Hall and Nash were sort of running their show and they got, I don't know, Bret Hart wasn't like the coolest person in the world. If they got Sting and made him look like, Crow Sting or something like that, but he still had if they somehow had Sting with an edge to him, I guess I'm getting at, if the NWO was sort of like a mini Attitude Era running wild in WCW as opposed to leathery Hogan, lumping his way all over the place. If they were able to inject kind of like, how original Bullet Club had that cool thing to it, that NWO was cool, but then they brought Big Show, or they brought the Giant on and they just bloated and, it just became very commercialized. The idea that, we're selling this merchandise out in the parking lot as opposed to inside the arena, and these vignettes were all grainy black and white. Well, if it had like a real level of like, this is actually really cool. Yeah. Kind of like like WWF was doing at the time. If there was an edge to it, a danger to it.
Exactly. That's what I was going to use. Then
maybe it could have infused that into WCW's product. And because then you have like a cool version of the NWO with like really neat guys feuding with like Raven and his guys. And what if they actually, because Raven was fucking cool as shit.
Yeah, Raven was awesome.
And what if they had pushed his group a little bit better and made them a little more dangerous than they were? And, you've got, I don't know. I think maybe if WCW had any idea on how to, make their product a bit cooler because Hogan wasn't in the NWO, maybe that would have been a possibility. Yeah. It's such a big, like, what if that it's just.
Totally. I know.
Yeah. But I think you're onto something, maybe. Anyways. That's going to do it. We've got some honorable mentions here as well. Yes. So let's talk New Japan Professional Wrestling in the recent past. Obviously, Bullet Club, they love their turns. They've kicked out multiple leaders. But Jay White and Gato leaving Chaos, especially Gato leaving Okada's side and joining Bullet Club and basically taking over was pretty shocking. Larson.
It was. It pretty much elevated Jay White to like main event status like right away.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
That whole storyline, and it was really well done. It was pretty cool. To have him be invited by Kenny Omega to join Bullet Club, he turns Kenny down to join Chaos, only to betray Okada. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Freebirds.
Yeah.
Betraying the Von Erichs on Christmas Day.
Oh, nice present there, Freebirds.
Yeah.
A steel cage door to the head.
Exactly. Mega powers exploding.
Ooh, yeah.
A few that lasted, almost 2 years.
Oh, man. A coke-fueled explosion all over Miss Elizabeth, who never felt comfortable being on camera. That shit's so weird. Obviously, I want to go back and revisit the Mega Powers, man, because like that shit's so weird. Everybody talks like, "Oh, it's the best story in wrestling." Oh yeah,
it was good. It was really good for the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because it was one of the few times they actually took, a protracted amount of time, almost 2 years, to tell the story of the two most popular wrestlers in WWF
Were you still watching forces. When the Mega Powers exploded, Larson?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were you all into it? Had you picked a side?
I mean, I want to say I was Team Macho Man, but I'm not. I don't know. I was young. I don't know.
It's okay, man. It's all right if you're Team Hogan. It's all good.
I don't think I was. I don't.
Nobody's gonna cancel you.
You know, here's the thing. I don't remember ever being like really huge into Hogan.
Yeah.
I just don't remember. Like, I never bought any Hogan stuff.
Oh man, I had a shirt.
I don't remember having any of Hogan's toys.
Yeah. Thought it was cool. I thought it looked so cool with his leathery skin. His obvious back pain he was walking through.
Yeah, I know. But you know, I don't remember honestly, like whether it was Team Hogan or Team Macho Man. I was like, wow, this is interesting.
You were like, I just want some good wrestling. That's all I care.
I'm rooting for good wrestling here.
You're like, I want work rate. I'm Team work rate,
high work rate, quality stories. I was like, Dad, can you tell me how to spell work rate? Doing my own vocabulary here.
See, man, you should have started your own newsletter back then.
I guess so.
Yeah, you'd be making a fortune.
Kayfabe.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of Countout. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.